teachers of Reddit, have you ever had a crush on a student? And if so, how did you feel about yourself? Kind of reversed, but when I was in high school I had a Spanish class that I was very advanced in given the material. The teacher would often tutor me directly, and things seemingly got a bit flirty sometimes. We ended up actually hooking up one day after class. Homeschool was weird. Sort of. I was 24, and she was 17, and I never did anything, but I totally acknowledged to myself that she was very pretty and clever. It made me feel weird, but I didn't sexualize her or anything. It was more a thought that wow, if I was 7 years younger, I'd totally be into her. I used to teach entry-level programming at an art school to undergrads, and later at the graduate level. It happened all the f***ing time, but I never felt bad about it, cause they were adults, and I was the same age. Obviously, I couldn't act on anything as a matter of policy, and I certainly didn't let it affect my grading, but goddamn it was difficult, especially with the 2 instances where I could tell it was mutual. Or maybe it wasn't, and they just wanted better grades, I don't know. They both got C's regardless. Edit, I get it. D jokes. My dad was my mom's professor in university. They got married. The marriage didn't go well. I'm the result of what happens when people try to save a relationship by having a baby. Once had a very attractive student teacher in my senior year. She was 24, I was 18. A ton of the other students were talking about how bad they wanted to FCK her. I became pretty good friends with her. We read similar books, listen to similar music. And one day she asked me for a ride home because her car wasn't working. I drove her to her house and she invited me inside. After talking for about an hour, we went into the bedroom and FK'd. We kept it secret from everybody, and after I graduated we began a stable relationship. We dated for about 2 years, until she moved to Washington. I would say she had a crush on me. College professor here. I get a lot of gorgeous students, but the attraction usually lasts as long as it takes them to open their mouths. What can I say when you're in your 30s, 18, 22-year-olds suddenly seem very shallow and immature to you? Trust me, you will come to think the same way. But then I had a student who was not only stunningly beautiful, but also very mature beyond her years, and she had a lot of similar interests to me. And what's better, because she was new to America from England, she was also a bit lost and confused, and I told her she could to me whenever she wanted, if she needed advice and guidance. She did for a while, but I never did anything but just talk with her. As attracted as I was to her, trying to make a move would have been a very tricky thing, because student-teacher relationships are very taboo. The thing is though, as she adjusted to America she started coming by less often, because she didn't really need our talks anymore. After the class was over I hardly ever ran into her anymore, so the opportunity just never presented itself. I look back on it now as a for the best thing. Even if she had been interested in me, and I don't think she was, I'm quite used to my students, even the more mature ones, automatically seeing me as an old geezer. Even though I'm 31 now and this was a couple years ago, if I'd had a relationship with her and we'd been caught, it could have potentially been the end of my career, or at the very least it would have gotten me in a lot of hot water. But I also found that shortly after the class ended and I stopped seeing her with any frequency, that she fell out of my thoughts too, and I went back to being interested in women my own age who are preferably not my students. I'm actually glad that it doesn't bother me anymore, because I feel like it would be beyond pathetic for someone like me to be so hopelessly in love with a student. Don't know a damn about how I was feeling, but my loins frothed up every time I looked at her. 50 Shades of Grades. I work in a school and have never felt this way about a student, but I've known 2 teachers who fell for students, took it too far, and got fired. Each of them were profoundly unhappy people. Reverse problem. My girlfriend sometimes reminds me of my students now. It is very disconcerting. I'm 25, she's 23 and I teach 15, 18 YO students. Back in 8th grade I had this young super attractive teacher for history. Don't know how old she was, but she had only been teaching for 1 year and was recently married, so my guess is 23, 24. Anyway, one day I go to her desk to hand her something, and she was standing and leans forward to show me in the book what I need to read look at. Well, I missed everything she was saying because holy hell I could see right down her shirt and those biobs had 8th grade me captured. I was totally zoned out just looking and looking. At some point she stopped talking and noticed what I was doing and just smiled and was looking at me, never stood up or covered up. Our eyes met and she just smiled, winked, and then sent me on my way. The rest of the year was kind of flirty, but she never ever tried anything. Fast forward 12, 13 years, and one day randomly on Facebook I get a friend request from her. Haven't spoke to her since I left the 8th grade. No idea why she added me. Thought well maybe she adds all the kids she taught. Well, despite my graduating class having over 1,000 kids, we had no mutual friends. So I waited a while to accept it and then eventually did. Still no friends that were in my grade. Finally I got creeped out and deleted her. Still have no idea why she did that. Makes me wonder if there's something more behind it. I was a tar for a drawing class for a couple of semesters. It was the sort of tar position where the professor would hand you the outline for the semester and you teach one of his classes. There was this one girl that looked like a sort of Persian goddess, and she was f***ing talented, which drew me to her even more. We got to the part of the class where we started doing portraits. I'd take volunteers from the class and we'd all draw them. I would bounce between critiquing students' work and doing the portrait myself, because observing is a great way to learn. The first few went very well. I was on my teaching game, and my portraits were up to my standards. Being a good sport, I'd give it to the model. When they were done, the first one asked for this, and it just sort of became a thing. Then she came up. The thing about drawing is you have to be able to ignore your brain's preconceived ideas of what you are looking at and dissect the visual information analytically. I found her so beautiful. For the first time in my life I could not do this. I drew, I erased, I drew, I erased. I wasn't bouncing around as much as I had been because I was so frustrated that I could not draw the one person in the class I wanted to draw. We finished and it turned out okay. Not great, just okay. I still gave it to her, but I was honestly ashamed of it. At the end of the last portrait class, one of the models asked how they'd done. This led to a discussion on how they'd all done. Persian goddess asked the inevitable question. I told her she was difficult to draw. She asked why. I immediately regretted my initial response. I think I said something about her features being unusual or something cringeworthy. I wanted to tell her she was too beautiful, but I couldn't. If you're reading this, Persian goddess, I'm sorry. I should have told you that you were gorgeous.